Hello. Thank you for being here tonight. My name is Mark Farrelly, and just so you understand my relationship to this whole thing, I've been involved in the Understanding Music Seminar for over 20 years. I was part of the team that originally brought a gentleman to Australia called Duncan Lorien. Now, all of the material you will see tonight is based on Duncan's research and discoveries as part of the Understanding Music Seminar. Who's Duncan Lorien? Well, here's this chap on your little handout there. He's a little guy in the corner here. Just a very brief snapshot of him. At the age of 4, he was playing piano. Oh yes, child prodigy. We've all heard that story before, right? Yes, he was. But the amazing thing that made him different to everybody else is at the age of 8, he was teaching. Now that's where his story goes a little bit different. And when I say teaching, what I mean is that when he was learning music from his formal teacher, he was seeing patterns and stuff in music that he thought everybody could see. So when a friend came over, he would show them something that he'd learnt, but he'd show it as a pattern, because to him it was the most obvious, easy and simple way to explain it to somebody without getting into all the complicated stuff, right? By the time he was 12 years old, he would come home from school at night and there would be a queue outside his front door, all his school friends, all waiting for their lesson, right? With a background like that, his natural path was everybody said to him when he finished high school, you should go to music college, train to become a music teacher, and because this was in the UK, you then get your official little shingle that you can hang out the front that says, I'm a licensed, certified music teacher. So he duly went off down that path and started learning the formal way to be a music teacher. And of course what happened was, within about 6 months, he's having constant arguments with the lecturers and the tutors at the music college, because they're going, this is how you do scales. And he goes, no, you don't do it like that. It's so easy if you do it like this. Loggerheads, big argument, he left, right? He then went on to become a musician, and during the 80s he had a couple of #1 albums in the UK. He was into that sort of alternative music that was around in the hippie music of the 80s. And then he became like a producer. And one of the things that he found was that we've all seen and heard the scenario where a musician or a band, suddenly comes out of nowhere and has the big hit, the single or the album. It's this huge success, right? Overnight success. And then you never hear from them again. Why? Well, there's lots of reasons why, but the simple reason is generally they don't know how they did what they did, right? So what happened was the record companies would contact Duncan and say, look, we've got this guy or this girl or this band that has had this huge success, and now we've signed them up for a 7-album deal, and they've been in the studio for 18 months and they're all just fighting and we can't sort of work it out. And so he would sit down and talk to them about music. And what he would find, and this is the thing that will surprise most of you, I think, what you'll find is that most of them don't actually know what they're doing. And in some sort of brief moment of drug-induced hysteria or whatever it was, right, they came up with a hit. And because they don't actually understand what they're doing, they can't do it again. So he would strip them down and basically find out what about music they didn't understand and help fix them up. Now, most of you here tonight will probably be of the assumption that if you see somebody like, I don't know, Elton John or Paul McCartney or some incredibly successful musician, that if you sat them down with a piece of written sheet music, they'd be able to play it. No, they can't. Elton John does not read music. He cannot read music. Neither does Paul McCartney. Right? Now, I'm not suggesting in any way that they're not incredibly talented musicians, but they're incredibly talented musicians despite their lack of understanding of what music is actually all about, right? And so they luck it and they chance it, right? So Duncan started to become Mr. Fix-It for musicians and record companies and all that sort of stuff And he developed, in the end, it became easier for him to sort of fix up a group of people in a weekend rather than try and do one-on-one. Hence he came up with this seminar that he called the Understanding of Music Seminar, which is a weekend seminar, right? But we're not going to do a weekend tonight, we're going to do 3 hours worth. But in those 3 hours, I'm going to give you some of the tastiest, juiciest, meatiest little bits of the seminar so that you can see for yourself, right? Basically, how simple and easy music is. First, a little survey. Who in the audience has at some point in the past tried to learn music? Like either as a child you had lessons, or you went on YouTube, you had a mate who went, you do it like this, or somebody went to do it like that, or whatever. So somebody, some experience with music in your past. Hands up. Okie dokie. There was a few people who probably would be classified as never even touched a musical instrument. Hands up for those ones. Fantastic, you guys are just going to have such a great time tonight. Do you know what? You're already ahead of the game. Because you don't have to unlearn anything. Because trust me, tonight, what you're going to be going through is a whole bunch of stuff inside your head will be, what? No, but I was told, I always thought, and you're going to have to unlearn stuff. Right? So, let's get started, huh? So the very first thing we might do, since tonight is called the Understanding of Music, right? So, would you mind? That's the Oxford Dictionary of Music, the most authoritative music dictionary on the planet. Would you mind looking up the word music and reading the definition to the audience so that we can at least have agreement and definition on what we're looking at tonight? It's under M.
Musica.
Musica, you're getting close. Should be before that.
No.
It's not there.
It's not.
Oh, I'm sorry, that was a terrible joke and it was a setup. Yes, if you look in the Oxford Dictionary of Music, in its paperback, hardback form, you will not find the definition of music. In fact, Duncan has 65 musical dictionaries. 63 of them do not have a definition of music. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, but if you were studying architecture, I'm pretty sure that if you looked in an architecture dictionary, you would find a definition of architecture, correct? A medical dictionary, you'd find a definition of medicine. Just about any subject has itself defined. Music does not. Music has become a very lost and confused subject over the last 2,000 years. And in fact, do you know that Duncan has discovered that of all the subjects on the planet, more people take up music and give it up than any other subject on the planet? Isn't that amazing? Like, people take up painting. They keep at it. People take up pottery. They keep at it. People take up gardening. They keep at it. People take up music. They give up in frustration. Do you know why? There's a really simple explanation, which I can tell you now, and then you can probably all go home. The subject of music, 50% of the subject of music, is completely logical and makes total and absolute sense. The other 50% is, pardon my French, batshit crazy. And the only reason you've ever had any problems with it is nobody ever told you which 50% you were doing. So this is what happens. Somebody starts learning music, and the first bit of it makes sense. They start going, oh yeah, I get that. Oh, you do, oh yeah, you know, right? And you're going along and you're winning and you're doing fine and you're on this journey and you think, I'm going to nail this. And then you run into one of the batshit crazy bits. And what happens? Well, what's the normal human reaction when you come across something you don't understand? What do you automatically think? There must be something wrong with me, because I don't get it. You never actually ask the right question or make the right statement. There must be something wrong with the subject. Okay? So what we're going to look at tonight is what's wrong with the subject, not what's wrong with you. Okay? How's that sound? So, before we get into the serious thing, let's just quickly do a little survey of, you know, music is one of those things that everybody knows something about, right? Like, for example, everybody knows this symbol, right? This symbol, we all know this symbol?
Yeah.
Most famous musical symbol in the entire world, correct? Yeah. Except it's not a musical symbol. It actually has nothing to do with music. And I'll explain what it is and why it has nothing to do with music later. But first, let's have a look at all of the things that everyone knows about music, right? Okay. So, you wouldn't be here unless, like most people, you believed that music was to some degree a complex subject, correct? Yeah, there's some complexity. There's symbols and things, you look at a piece of written music, you kind of go, well, the ants just danced all over the page, I don't know what's going on here, right? Somebody says, you know, could you modulate to a different key and give me a flattened fifth and a whatever, and you start going, oh, I don't know what's going on here, right? So it's a complex appearing and sounding subject. It's also a very serious subject, isn't it? You know that expression, you'll never get anywhere with your music unless you're serious about it. Unless you sit there night after night practicing your scale down band, you're never going to get anywhere, correct? Right? So it's a very serious subject. Now, for these two reasons, right, it takes years to learn, doesn't it? It's not like something you could master overnight. I might just make that a little easier for people to read. So it's complex, it's serious, it takes years, right? And for these reasons, you obviously need professional tuition, right? That's why God made music teachers, right? Yeah. Do you basically agree with these fundamental truths of music? Right. And of course, if it's all this, then it's going to cost that, isn't it? Whenever you get a professional involved, money, right? Okay. And of course, you can't even start learning music unless you have something called natural talent. You know, you always hear everybody, don't you? You know, oh, my sister Susie, she's the musical one. Yeah, she got the gift. Me, I'm hopeless, right? But I'm really good at gardening. I just didn't get the musical gift, right? Now, it's really funny, I don't know where this musical gift comes from. A long time ago, it used to be, you know, the deity upstairs, but now it seems to be caused by genetics. Do you know what I mean? Like one day somebody's going to be peering down a microscope, right? Looking at some strand of DNA, you know, and there'll be a little DNA molecule, you know, giving it the John Travolta, you know, and everybody will go, that's the musical gene, we found it. Now, because of all these things, therefore, if it's complex, if it's serious, if it takes years, if you need professional tuition, if it costs lots of money, and it requires natural talent, it by definition means it's not for everyone. Correct. Now, these are the 6 biggest truths of music. Would we broadly agree? Yeah? Yeah, we have broad agreement on that. Except, of course, they're all lies. They're all myths. They're all untruths. And the incredible thing is they've all been added to the subject. And what we're going to see tonight is how they got added to the subject. Because the subject of music does not fit into those categories. Okay? So let's have a look at how this journey started. The first thing we've got to do is we've got to go back to a place in space and time about 2,000 years ago to a group of people called the ancient Greeks. No? What did the ancient Greeks ever do for us, right? Well, They did a lot of things, but one of the things they did do is they understood the world in terms of relationships, right? So the Greeks had this really interconnected but quite simple viewpoint of the world, right? And this is actually what started Duncan on his journey of trying to work out how did the subject get screwed up. Because he read a quote by Herodotus, right? Now we've all read Herodotus, the famous Greek historian, right? And he happened to mention in passing that in ancient Greece, every child who went to school by the age of 9 or 10 had mastered 2 to 3 instruments. And now, that shocked him, and I'm just going to say it again slowly so you make sure you got it. In ancient Greece, by the age of 9 or 10, every child who went to school by the age of 9 or 10 had mastered 2 to 3 instruments. Come forward in time to now, how do we think every 9 and 10-year-old child who goes to school these days goes with music? Maybe 1 in 100 might have some rudimentary principle of playing maybe not badly one instrument, right? But it was nowhere near like that. So between then and now, something went wrong. I'll tell you what went wrong. These things got added to the subject. So let's have a look at the way the ancient Greeks looked at music, right? And in doing so, I'm going to define the word music for you. But first, the ancient Greeks, when they went to school, they only studied 2 subjects, right? The first subject was a subject called gymnos. Comes from naked or body, okay? Now, in ancient Greece, when you studied the subject of gymnos, you studied everything to do with the body. Exercise, keeping the body strong, fit and healthy, right? Diet, feeding the body. Agriculture, growing food for the body. Architecture, housing the body, right? Anything to do with the body itself in any way, shape or form was studied under one subject called gymnos. And guess where they studied that subject? Anybody have a clue? In a gymnasium. Now, to this day, in lots of parts of Europe, a university is called a gymnasium, correct? Yeah. Right. This is why, right? Because they're a lot closer to ancient Greece back there than we are. Right? Now, if you weren't studying gymnos, what's the only other subject you could study? Musica. Not musaka. Now, what was musica? Well, if gymnos was the study of everything to do with the body, musica was the study of everything to do with the mind or the spirit. Everything that was not tangible, everything that was abstract. Mathematics, philosophy, art, poetry, music, singing, right? Anything that was not to do with the body was studied under musica. Now, the expansion of that was, who's ever heard of the 9 muses? The 9 muses were the goddess daughters of the goddess Mnemosyne. I'm going to probably spell this wrong. It's the only word in the English language that starts MN. And from this, we get the word mnemonic. Because Mnemosyne was the goddess of memory. Because the Greeks believed that the memory of a culture was carried forward in its arts and sciences. Right? Now, if you think about it, that's actually true. How do we know anything about the ancient Greeks? Because they left behind art forms. They left behind painting and sculpture and architecture and written form. The people have gone, but their memory of their culture lives on through their art forms. So in actual fact, the Greeks had it nailed. The memory of a culture carries forward in time through its arts and sciences, which ironically are intangible, largely, but expressed materially. So it's the spirituality of a culture that lives forever. That's a little bit freaky, but that's basically true, right? So, where did you study musica, which was brought to you by the 9 muses, who were the daughters of the goddess of memory? You studied musica in a museum, the House of the Muses. A little bit different to what we think of a museum as today. It's a place where we keep the dusty old dinosaur bones, right? Right? But to the Greeks, this was a living, breathing place. And the reason why the word music is not in a music dictionary is because, per this definition, it's the study of the mind and the spirit. Which takes us a little away from Bach and Beethoven, you know, all those kind of dudes, doesn't it, right? So, let's look at how the Greeks learned music. Will that be good? So, as I said before, the Greeks studied relationships. Now, the body and the spirit and the mind were related. So the reason you studied the 2 subjects in parallel was because you couldn't really understand the body unless you also understood the mind. You couldn't understand abstract poetry if you didn't understand medicine, right? The Greeks saw everything as connected, as holistic. They were a really holistic culture, right? So therefore they looked at relationships, and we all know about the Greeks and their, you know, architectural relationships. You know, all their buildings were built along, you know, 3, 4, 5s, and all these sacred sort of relationships and things like that, right? So when it came to music, they had a really cool way of understanding music, right? When they looked at music, they said to themselves, the power of music does not lie in the notes. The power of music lies in the relationships between the notes. Okay? And in fact, the notes are what they are because of the relationships between them. Now, just to give you a slightly parallel study there, if you speak to a Buddhist, they could describe, we in the West would describe this room as a set of walls and a ceiling and a floor that contains a space, correct? That's sort of the very Western way of looking at it, right? A Buddhist may look at it this way. It's a space that holds the walls and floors apart and therefore creates the room. Just a different way of looking at the same thing. Who is it to say that the walls are more important than the space? If you put the walls together, you wouldn't have a room. Why? Because you have to create the space in order to make the room. So which is more important, the walls or the space? Well, they're kind of both, aren't they? Does it matter whether you define the room by the walls or by the space? You still end up with a room, don't you? So, let's have a look at music slightly differently than the way we normally do it. And for that, I'm going to need somebody's help. Come on, darling. This is my daughter, by the way, who I promised not to embarrass, but being a dad, I had to embarrass her. So, I want you to follow me, darling. Right. So, I'm going to use these 2 to represent a couple of notes, right? And I'm going to play a pattern, right? And I want you to follow the pattern and duplicate it after I finish with it, all right? Okay, so here we go. There you go. Bit hard to do, isn't it? All right, why don't you sit down, darling? Let's try something simpler. Could you help me, please? Could you take this book, and I want you to hold it up like this, right? Face the audience. Hold it in one location until I do something to it, and then move it to another location, right? What we're going to say is this is a space, and it's a space between these two notes. So when the space is here, I'm going to play these two notes. This one, then this one, okay? Now, move that space to another place. Move that space to another place. Move that space radically somewhere else. Right. Move it somewhere else. Thank you. Do you see that when you have a fixed space, which is a relationship between two notes, it's much simpler to follow, isn't it? Because wherever the space is, it's a fixed relationship between two notes. And it therefore doesn't matter where I locate them, the relationship between the two notes remains fixed. So therefore, I only have to know the size of the space between the notes, and I suddenly have a relationship that's easy to understand. Does that make sense? Yeah? Okay, cool. So, in music, we can have spaces. Now, this is a keyboard, as we all know. I'm going to do something to this keyboard, which is the way I want you to see the keyboard for the rest of tonight, right? Because the keyboard is a little bit misleading, and we'll also look at how it became this, right? So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to get my trusty chainsaw, and I'm going to cut off the bottom of all the keys, the white keys. So now all the keys are the same length. Did you get that? I'm then going to take a red paintbrush, right? Paint them all red. So now we have keys that are all the same length and all the same colour. Is there any difference between them now? No, they're all the same. You just notice. No? Okay. So, let's imagine a space of time. Okay? So I'm going to play a note, this note, right? And then I'm just going to give a space of time, right? So I'm going to go 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. Right? It's the same note, but I'm giving it a space of time. Right? So it's like this. Can you hear the space of time? You can, can't you? Right? Even though it's not actually a sound, you can hear the space. Let's do another thing. Let's define the smallest space in Western music, which Duncan calls a space of 1. I'll explain that in a second. If I go from this red note to this red note next to it, there is a space between them, correct? Yeah? Like this. Can you hear the space between those? Ah. So there's a difference between the notes. So I'm now a space in musical space, not a space in time, right? So I go from here to here, right? Or I can equally go from here to here. And it's a space of 1. Now, why do we call it a space of 1 in our system and not what they call it out there? Well, do you know what they call it out there? Some of you probably know this. It's called a semitone, or a half step, right? Now, I don't know about you, but I find it pretty hard to take a half step. You can't, can you? You either take a step or no step. Why do they do that? Well, there's a thing called a tone, and then there's a thing called a semitone, which is half a tone. We took a tone, we cut it in half, and that's the first thing we're going to teach you. A half of something. Right. So we're just going to make it really nice and simple. It's a space of 1. From here to here, or from here to here, is a space of 1. This one's really easy to see, isn't it? Between these two red notes here. There to there. Space of 1. Now, what's the value of the space? We'll find that out in just a second. Right? So, could you come up, please? Now, I'm going to do the same thing with this keyboard using this. The bottom part of the keyboard does not exist, sir. So could you please pick any of the red coloured notes and play it, and then go up towards the right a space of 1. Good, perfect. Pick another one, and go up a space of 1. Fantastic, well done. Thank you very much. Symphony in a space of 1. Who else would like to play a space of 1? Matt, would you like to come up and play a space of 1? So please pick any of the red notes, hit it with your finger, and go a space of 1. Up a space of 1. So to the right. No, to the next note. Good. There you go. Yeah? Beautiful. And another one? Pick another note somewhere. Black, doesn't matter. Good. Up space of 1. Great. Now play the first one that you played before, and now this time be radical and go down a space of 1. Okay, cool. Thank you very much. So you can go up a space of 1, you can go down a space of 1. Right? Now music's wonderful, isn't it? Who decided that right was up and left was down? Who decided that? I don't know. It just got decided, right? But you want to know how crazy music is? You know, on a guitar, there are 2 ways to go up in pitch in a guitar to make the sound go higher, and both of them are physically going down. If you go down the string this way, it goes up. If you go down the string this way, it goes up. No wonder people have some trouble with this subject. If ever there was a subject that was just designed to make you go crazy, it's music. Right? So, if we can have a space of 1, then obviously we could have a space of 2, couldn't we? 2 would just be 2 ones. So if I start here and I go up 1, up 2, I've now jumped from there to there, I've jumped 2 spaces, correct? Basic maths. 1 plus 1 equals 2. Can you hear that's a space of 2 as opposed to a space of 1? Again, you're all hearing something that isn't there. It's the space between the notes. Now, the reason this fell out is because the idea of spaces is actually the idea of studying something that's not there. It's like if I asked you, sir, to go outside, dig a hole and bring the hole in here so we can have a look at it. You can't do that, can you? Because what's a hole? The absence of material. You can't study an absence unless it's in a context. Right? Okay? All right, so we've got spaces of 1 and we've got spaces of 2. So what are we going to do with these? Well, the first thing we're going to do is we are going to play with something called scales. Scales. Do you know per survey scales is the #1 reason why people give up music? Let's have a look at the simplicity of the scale, and then I'll tell you what they do in music university and teaching, right? The word scale comes from the Latin scala, which simply means ladder or series of steps. Okay? May I demonstrate to you a scale? Was that a series of steps? That's a scale. But you're all sitting there going, yeah, but it's not one of those scales that, you know, you're supposed to be. Oh, you mean like... Oh, that kind of scale. Right, okay. Well, that's a certain scale, right? But by definition, a scale is simply a series of steps. It's a ladder. Now, let me tell you something really bizarre about that. Is most people hear this and they go, well, it's not complete until I go, correct? I'm sorry, but when you went to Bunnings and bought a ladder, and the first time you went up the ladder and got to the top, did you notice at the top of the ladder a sign that said, having come up the ladder, you must now immediately turn around and go down the ladder exactly the same way that you came up? No. If it's not true out there, it's not true in music. But why is it? Why do they obsess about it? Well, Because they like to torture young children, basically. That's basically what it's all about. I mean, you think about it, how many children have sat there every Saturday afternoon going, wondering, after 2 hours, when am I going to turn into a musician? Well, I can tell you that you will never turn into a musician, no matter how many hours if that. Do you know why? Have you ever in your life heard this in a piece of music? No, never. 800 years of Western music, not one person from Bach to Britney Spears has ever put that in a piece of music. So why is every child forced to do it for hours on end?
Very good question.
Exactly, because they like to torture children because it's a very serious subject. Nobody ever tells you what you do with a scale. What's the purpose of a scale? We're going to find that out shortly. But first, how about I teach you, I don't know, well, let me show you something about music. We won't get into anything complex here, but can you see that there's a repeating pattern on the keyboard? So there's three white notes with 2 black notes, 4 white notes with 3 black notes, and then that just repeats up and down the keyboard. We can all see that pattern, right? Okay. So, if we say from here to here, let's count the number of notes inclusive. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 13, back to the other, right? So, if you define a scale as a pattern that you can start on any one of those 13 notes, right, then obviously, in order to learn 13 major scales, you would need to remember 13 patterns, correct? That's the way music goes, right? 13 scales. And now, by the way, major. Let's look this up. What does the word major mean in music? Oh, there's lots of stuff. Major means happy, minor means sad. All sorts of things about it out there, right? Do you know what it actually means? It comes from the Latin magnum, which means great. Of greater use or importance. So, which do you think is the most predominantly used scale in Western music? The major scale. Why? Because it means most popular, most common, most important, most often used. So let's learn all of our major scales. From memory, are you getting ready? Have you all had a good coffee? Lots of room in the memory banks up here? Okay, here we go. Watch this. We'll start with the first one. It's a pretty complex pattern. 2, then a 2, then a 1, then a 2, then a 2, then a 2, then a 1. Or 2, 2, 1, 2, 2, 2, 1. Who thinks they would wake up tomorrow morning and not be able to remember that? Okay, that's a pattern of spaces. So imagine this. You know, we were learning about spaces before. So you play a note. Here's a note. And then you count up 2 spaces and you play another note. And you play a note. And then you count up 1. You play a note. Count up 2, play a note, count up 2, play a note, count up 2, play a note, count up 1, play a note. And there's our major scale. So, but that's only one of them, right? No, that's all of them. Every major scale has one pattern. This pattern. If you start this pattern On any one of these 13 notes from here to here, you will be playing a major scale. And it sounds like this. So, note, up, 2, up, 1, up, 2, up, 2, up, 2, up, 1. Major scale. Another major scale. Note, up 2, up 1, up 2, up 2, up 2, 2, up 1. Doesn't matter where you started, the pattern is the same. There is only one piece of information you need to know all your major scales, and that is it. Do you want to know something? Well, first, let's get some people up here. My friend, please demonstrate a major scale with one finger, starting on any note you like. So just play like this, just go bang and hit a note, right? Start on any note, play the note, then count, right? So play a note, up 2, up 2, up 1, up 2, up 2, up 2, up 1. Beautiful, fantastic, mad. Major scale, nailed. Now, he could have started on any of those 13 notes, played the same pattern, and still would have sounded like a major scale. Sir, have you played a major scale before on the keyboard?
I think I have.
Come on, get a refresh. So one finger, like this. Sit down. So remember, we cut off here, so I want you to count off the top. So just hit any note, then up 2, up 2, up 1, up 2, up 2, up 2, up 1. Now let's get really radical, because that was one you already knew. Pick a black note right down there somewhere, okay? Hit it. Now up 2, up 2, up 1, up 2, up 2, up 2, up 1. Brilliant. Major scale. Anybody else not get this? Is this difficult, complex? Anybody else want to have a go? Has never played a major scale before?
No, I haven't.
Come on up, come on up. Grab a seat. Big finger like this.
Yep.
Hit a note. Good. Up 2, up 2, up 1. No. Not allowed to take the bottom off.
I didn't mean it.
Sorry, we gotta stay.
Right.
Right? Okay, so hit a note. Good. Up 2, up 2, up 1. Good. Up 2, up 2, up 2, up 1. Brilliant.
Oh, cool.
Easy. Fantastic. Now, I'll tell you the reason why we're cutting off the bottom of the keyboard, because look, right? If we look at the bottom of the keyboard, right, that looks the same as that, doesn't it? To the eye, right? But this is a space of 1 and this is a space of 2, correct? Right? So this is why I do the counting like this. I go, okay, we're going to play a major scale. I'm going to start here. I'm going to go play the note, follow the pattern here. Up 2, up 2, up 1, up 2, up 2, up 2, up 1. That's it. So you've just learnt all your major scales. How long have we been working on this for now? 10 minutes maybe? Do you know how long this takes in the average music university? About 3 months. Do you know why? Well, you see, when they teach you scales, as I said before, there's 13 starting points, 13 notes that you can start on. If you think of it as 12 before the pattern repeats, it's 12 different notes. So if there are 12 different starting points for any major scale, you can start it on 12 different notes. And there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 notes in the scale. in order to memorise all of your scales, major scales, by note name. And do you notice we've been playing major scales and we didn't even know what the note's called? See, let's get into doing it before we get into the complexity of it. Let's start, right? They make you memorise 96 different combinations of note names in order to say, I now know how to play my major scales. Right? So you've got to sit there and go, you know, in the F sharp major scale, it's F sharp followed by G sharp followed by, but in the C sharp major scale, it's C sharp followed by. You've got to walk around the university building all day memorising these patterns. Now, if you think that's crazy, and remember, we only need one piece of information to do the same thing. To do the same thing, right? They do that. Do you know what's the next thing they then do? They then throw that out and teach you the whole 12 scale patterns using Roman numerals. 1, Roman 1, Roman 2, Roman 3, Roman 4, Roman 5, Roman 6. Right? Then, having taught you that, and they differ, the patterns differ, right? Having taught you that, they then say, we'll throw that all out, and then let's teach you the same thing using Latin syllables. Do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do. They're Roman syllables, Latin syllables, sorry. Right? And they're actually the first syllable of a song that was a prayer to St. John the Baptist from about 800 years ago, and it evolved into a method of teaching the scales. Do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do. Right, okay. So, they teach you all of your scales using them. And if that's not enough, they then come up with one more crazy way to teach you the scales. Using Latin words. Dominant, mediant, tonic, subdominant. Right? And so you have to memorise 4 different sets of coding for the same thing. Mind you, you're not playing anything different. It's just when you're playing it, you're going C, D, E, and then you're going Roman 1, Roman 2, Roman, and then you're going do, re, and then you're going mediant, tonic, dominant. Right? You're not doing anything. Do you know what that's the equivalent of is? That's the equivalent of me teaching you, sir, how to repair your car using a manual first in ancient Aramaic, then in Albanian, then in Swedish, right? And then in Algonquin, North American native language, without ever once teaching you that information in your native language of English. Because guess what's the one thing they never show you in a university? They never show you 221, 2221, which is the only piece of information you need. The rest of it is completely redundant. So you see, when people do our 3-day seminar and get to the end, and we've had people who've done PhDs in music and music degree students do it, and they'll write little testimonials at the end where they'll say, this is better than my 3-year music degree, right? And I learnt more and I understand more. The amazing thing is not how do we compress 3 years of a university degree into 3 days, it's how do they stretch 3 days into 3 years. That's how they do it. They take one piece of information and complicate it for 6 months without ever showing you the simplicity. Now, Duncan, the guy who created the seminar, happens to live in a city called Boston. Boston happens to be home to the most well-renowned music college in the world, Berkeley. Do you know in Berkeley, a 3-year music degree costs $180,000 US. And they proudly boast that they have an 8% graduation rate.
8%.
8%.
8% graduation.
8%. And they're proud of that. Do you know why? Because they believe that that shows how tough they are. and that only the best of the best make it through Berkeley. But do you want to know something about Berkeley? Now, I don't know, this is again where music goes crazy and everything else is sunny. Can you imagine a medical university anywhere around the world that charged $180,000 for a degree and had an 8% graduation rate? There would be parents rioting in the streets saying, I spent $180,000 trying to turn my child into a doctor and you've screwed him up. In Berkeley they go, yeah, we screwed him up, but that's just because they're not good enough. Do you know what happens to all of the Berkeley graduates? If you go through just about any album cover and look at the credentials of any successful professional performing musician, you will find that not one of them has ever studied at Berkeley. Do you know why? Because all Berkeley does is produce music teachers who then go around the world subjecting children to the same torture that they went through. Which is why you now understand why children are forced every Saturday afternoon to sit there doing this, because that's what they were forced to do. It's torture passed on from generation to generation. And Berkeley, of course, isn't a music college anymore. It owns about 8 city blocks in Boston and produces an income in excess of $200 million a year from rental alone. So it's not even in the music business anymore, that's just the PR. So we mastered our major scales in a few minutes. I'm going to teach you a whole bunch of other scales. In fact, I'm going to teach you 48 scales from memory in a few minutes. How's that sound? Okay? You're not too full with this 221, 2221, are you? Because it hasn't sort of stored your entire capacity. Okay, let's have a go. My friends, this is the chromatic scale. Chromatic comes from the Latin chroma, colour. It's all the colours. White and black. Ta-da! The chromatic scale. Do you think you'll have any trouble remembering that one? Let's give you something harder. This one's called the whole tone scale. Hit a note. Go up 2, 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 go up 2. Bingo, done. Start on any one of 12 locations. You have 12 whole tone scales. Remember it's called the whole tone scale because 1 is a half, is a half step, a semitone, a half a tone. Right. Oh, let's get really complex now. This one. The diminished scale. 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. It's like being in the army. Hit a note, go up 1. Hit a note, go up 2. Hit a note, go up 1. No. That's it. 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. That's it. Now, here comes a really complex but funky one. That's what that baby is. It's the blues scale. Right? How's that one sound? Bit of fun. I'd like to sit there and play that every Saturday afternoon, wouldn't you? That'd be a bit more fun. Look at the pattern, it's 3, 2, 1. It's almost 3, 2, 1, 1, 2, 3, but it's 1, 3, 2, the last two are swapped around. No? 4 scale patterns, starting on 12 different notes. 4 times 12 is 48. Ladies and gentlemen, 48 scales. You've just learnt from memory. Well, how good's your memory? Okay, let's see. Okay, repeat after me. The pattern for the chromatic scale is 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1. Okay? The pattern for the whole tone scale is 2, 2, 2, 2, 2, 2, 2. I lost track there. No. Diminish, that's really hard, that one. 1, 2. Right. And the blue scale is?
3, 2, 1, 3, 2.
You didn't even fall over on the 1, 3, 2. 48 scales from memory in about 2 minutes. A scale's hard, a scale's complex, a scale's difficult to understand. Should scales take you 3 to 6 months to learn? No. But I've saved the best for last, because I promised to tell you the one thing they also never tell you in Berkeley. What's the purpose of a scale? A scale gives you a selection of notes with which you use to make your own music composition. We've mastered scales. Let's start composing music. How about that? We're about 45 minutes in. Are we starting to break down some of these a little bit? Huh? You understand this one now? It only takes years because they make it take years. So, let's have a look at a scale here. Remember our major scale? What was the pattern? 2, 2, 1. Yeah. 2 2s and a 1, 3 2s and a 1. Pretty simple, right? So, let's just pick a note. This one. Okay. This note. Up 2, up 2, up 1. Is everybody following me? Up 2, up 2, up 2, up 1. Oh, would you look at that? Did anybody notice something? It's all the white notes. That's pretty simple. And because scales have this amazing ability that if this pattern is true here, it's also true if you start here, if you start here. That means in actual fact, per the major scale, all of the white notes are connected to each other in the relationship of the major scale. What does that mean musically? What that actually means musically is you could play any combination of white notes in a pattern, one after the other, and musically, it would be correct. There would be nothing wrong with it, musically. There might be something wrong with it aesthetically. For example, if I did this, that's just a whole bunch of white notes. Now, nothing about them jarred, did they? You didn't hear a note and then hear the next one and go, oh, those two don't go together. But it didn't feel like music, did it? Why? Because music is a language, right? If you just sit here playing random things, you're not communicating anything. But if you take the basic principle that having established an agreement between all of these white notes using the major scale, if we start treating them like a language, we will suddenly start constructing something that sounds more like music. How do we do that? Well, it's pretty simple. We just decide to communicate something. And as soon as you do that, it starts sounding like music. Let me give you an example. I could say to you using words, hello, my name is Mark. I use words. I could also go, I just said the same thing musically, didn't I? What's the difference? Right? The difference is, between that and random notes, is there was a pattern to it that sounded like I was kind of trying to communicate something to you, correct? That's why your ear went, oh, that sounds a bit musical. Now, it's not the greatest little melody you've ever heard in your life, but it communicated, didn't it? Right? Okay? So, why don't you come up and tell the audience your name? sit down. Use one finger only. Say, hello, my name is, using words. Then say, hello, my name is, using only white notes. Okay? Do you get what I mean?
Yep.
Right. What's your name?
Hello, my name is Seth.
Hello, my name is Seth. Now, just have a listen to what you just said there. Hello, my name is Seth. All kind of runs together. So if you did that musically, it would sort of all just be, it'd be kind of, wouldn't it? Right? So how about we just space it out a little bit? So say it with a little bit of rhythm.
Hello, my name is Seth.
Great. Now play that pattern. Hello, my name is Seth. Brilliant, fantastic. There you go, well done. Well done. Sir, would you like to come up and introduce yourself to the audience musically? Grab a seat.
Yep.
So,
Hello, my name is Jason.
cool. All right, there we go. Man, I should have done name tags tonight, sorry. All right, introduce yourself.
Hello, my name is Gina.
Very nice. Excellent. One more, perhaps from the back of the crowd. Yes? She took her brave pills this morning. Caffeine, it's a wonderful thing. Right? So introduce yourself.
Hello, my name is Violet.
Wow, fantastic, thank you. So, do scales suddenly look kind of maybe interesting and useful? And you could actually do something with them? I mean, you could now literally just walk out of here, go home with only one piece of information. That is that all of the white notes are connected to each other through the pattern of the major scale, and spend the rest of your life sitting there making up things to say with your white notes. Right? I got up this morning. Took a shower. Then I went to work. You know, work's a bit of a downer, so I ended up. That is the essence of composition in music. No? That is the fundamental truth of it. And it's the purpose of the scale, which again, you never get taught in music university. You get taught all this stuff about scales, but nobody ever sits down and says this is what you do with them. Now, we're about to jump into another subject called chords.